Hello everyone! Welcome to our latest webinar, Customs Entry Process, Liquidation and Liquidation Reporting. I am Nick Esposito and I'll be your host today. I wear many hats here at TRG, but one of my favorite roles is that of an educator to both my fellow coworkers and you, my fellow international trade professionals. This webinar is being presented by Trade Risk Guaranty Brokerage Services, LLC, or as we commonly refer to as TRG. We are located in the heart of downtown Bozeman, Montana. For those unfamiliar with Bozeman, Montana, it's nestled right above Yellowstone National Park in southwestern Montana. If you're in town, don't be shy, stop on by the second floor of the historic R-Bar building. Our direct-to-importer business model is unique to the customs bond and cargo insurance markets. We've grown our business over the last 25 years to encompass over 10,000 clients from all avenues of international trade. As an important disclaimer, the information presented in this webinar is for information purposes only and is not intended and does not constitute legal advice. We will be recording this webinar and will be available on YouTube for future reference. If you have any questions during the presentation, submit it via the questions section of the webinar interface. The questions will be reviewed and answered by myself or our team of licensed customs brokers shortly after the webinar. If you have any additional questions outside the webinar, or if you would like to be a part of the community of trade professionals, join our Facebook group, International Trade Professionals-TRG. We regularly check the group for questions and encourage our members to start conversations amongst themselves if they have a common problem. During the course of today's webinar, I will walk you through the timeline of customs entry process, which will lead us up to the often overlooked and commonly misunderstood process of liquidation. Finally, we will address how you can utilize liquidation reporting to strengthen your customs compliance and ultimately protect your business. Let's start the presentation by getting familiar with customs entry process. Before we get too far, I'd like to define what I mean when I reference the term entry. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm specifically talking about a formal entry or an entry that requires the government-mandated placement of a U.S. customs bond. A formal entry is defined as the process of importing commodities which are typically used for commercial selling purposes covered by an entry bond with a total value that usually exceeds $2,500. There are certainly exceptions to this rule, and I would highly encourage anyone curious about this topic to research it further or email my team with any additional questions. Now that we've squared away what an entry is, let's take a peek at an overview, a timeline if you will, of customs entry process. The stages of entry process are as follows. Before United States arrival, goods arrive at the port, declaration of the entry, filing the cargo release, filing the entry summary, and the payment of estimated duties. Before goods arrive in the U.S., there are a few items you will need to have squared away with customs. First, you're going to have government-mandated U.S. customs bond in place. Customs bonds can be purchased from a company like TRG or in many cases by a customs broker or freight forwarder on your behalf. The second item on the list is to have your ISF, also known as Importer Security Filing, filed 24 hours before your goods leave the foreign port. Alongside this filing, you will need an ISF bond. However, if you have a continuous customs bond, the need for an ISF bond will already be satisfied. Third, you need to make arrangements at the port you wish to bring your goods into. Great. Everything on the checklist has been squared away and your goods arrive at the port. By port, I mean a port of entry, which is defined as areas where port-specific operations happen that include clearing cargo, collecting duties, processing passengers, etc. What I'm getting at is that ports don't need to be on the coast. In fact, a port of entry could just as easily be an international airport as some bring goods in via plane. Now that your goods have arrived at the port, you need to declare how these will be entered. Goods may be entered in three ways: for consumption, for warehouse at the port of arrival, or they may be transported in bond to another port of entry to be entered there. About 95% of the goods entered in the United States are entered for consumption, as this includes all commodities entered for commercial, business, or personal purposes. At this point, there are a few different deadlines for the various items that must be filed with customs. However, the majority of importers choose to handle them all at the same time and file for immediate release. This means they will submit their cargo release, entry summary, and their estimated duties simultaneously so that their goods can be released immediately upon clearing customs. If an importer chooses not to file for immediate release, there are specific deadlines for each one of these items. First up, your cargo release. Filing your cargo release must occur within 15 days of the goods arriving at port. This document does exactly what it says and releases the goods from customs custody. It also signals that the importer has the right to make entry. Until the cargo release has been filed, the goods will be stored at the terminal. However, additional fees for storage begin to accrue after 2 to 5 days. Once the cargo release has been submitted and the goods have been released, you'll have 10 days to file your entry summary, also known as CBP Form 7501. This is a key document in the importing process as it includes the importer's declarations as to the classification, origin, and value of the imported merchandise. Finally, you need to pay the estimated duties due for the goods. These duties are paid along with the filing of your entry summary so that the two are filed together. I'd like to take a quick minute to cover a very important topic. A major misconception of a vast majority of importers is that the final phase of the customs entry process is when they pay duties. I can't stress this enough. This phase is actually an estimation of the duties. Even though money is transferring hands, you're only really paying a deposit on what the duties could be. You will not know the final amount due until the time of liquidation, which is close to a year after the goods arrive at port. So remember, just because you've paid duties on your goods, the importation process has not been completed. Which leads us into our second topic of the day, liquidation. Liquidation commonly throws people off for a few reasons. First, the majority of us associate the term liquidation to a completely different business function, not a final determination of duties. Second, it's common for it to be almost an entire year after the goods actually arrived at the port that liquidation occurs. Third, you feel like you've already completed the process because you paid your estimated duties. Given these and other reasons, we wanted to bring clarity to what customs means when it talks about liquidation or the liquidation process. By definition, liquidation is the final assessment of money owed to customs based on the current knowledge of duty rates and the value of the imported goods. For the majority of imports, it is the final phase of importing. The final assessment is determined based on the rate of duty that correlates with the HTS US code used to classify the commodity. So, when does liquidation actually occur? Typically, customs will liquidate the entry within 314 days from the time of goods being entered in the US. If the goods haven't been liquidated after a year, customs will automatically liquidate them at the estimated duty rate, meaning there is no change from what you've already paid. All that said, there are exceptions to this timeline, which we'll cover a little bit later. You're probably curious at this point as to what customs is assessing or why the amount of duty would change at the time of liquidation. In a lot of cases, the final duty amount at the time of liquidation doesn't necessarily change, and often an entry liquidates with the initial estimated duty amount. However, there are a few reasons customs might demand more money be paid on an entry. One reason would be if the importer or customs broker misclassifies the good at the time of entry. In this case, customs determines that a different HTS US code should have been used to classify that commodity, and the updated HTS US code has a higher duty rate tied to it. Another reason for a change can be as a result of a recent customs ruling on your imported commodity that has changed its rate of duty. Even a ruling on similar commodity can influence a rate change. Alternatively, court cases and changes in customs practice can influence a final duty rate determination. In the event that the final duty owed is different than the estimated duty paid, there are two events that can occur. Either more duties are due and customs issues a supplemental duty bill, or too much was paid at the time of entry and customs issues you a refund. If you disagree with either of these outcomes, you do have 180 days from the liquidation date to protest the amount. In either event, this is a good time to stress having a current and accurate address on file for customs to reach you at, especially if a supplemental duty bill is issued, as these are timely requests and avoiding or missing a payment can lead to very serious consequences like resulting in the termination of your bond and possible legal intervention. Occasionally, and for very specific circumstances, the liquidation of your entry could be suspended or extended. When this occurs, customs is saying that it needs more time than the allotted 314 days to determine the final duty amount. Essentially, this places the final determination of your entry into limbo for at least another year. In some cases, we have seen entries go for as long as 7 years before being liquidated. As a result of these entries being in a state of limbo, the entry itself poses an unknown amount of additional danger to both importer and surety alike, especially because when these entries do liquidate, customs may impose additional tariffs on certain commodities contained within the entry that are subjected to anti-dumping or countervailing regulations, misclassification, or valuation issues. And in some instances, the additional tariffs may exceed 100% of the value of the particular commodities contained within the entry. Compounding on this risk is that the multiple years of suspended or extended entries can be stuck in limbo while waiting for customs to liquidate. Really, what this all boils down to is that in a worst case scenario, multiple years of suspended or extended entries can end up liquidating at a significantly higher rate of duty, resulting in a massive amount of money owed customs and can easily disrupt even a thriving importer's business. This leads us to the final topic of our webinar today, liquidation reporting. Liquidation reporting refers to the utilization of a reporting service that has access to customs data and is able to give you accurate and timely information on your entries. The layout of the report may vary from each service provider, but typically you can access data formatted similar to an Excel sheet that supplies columns of data to keep you on track with your entries. Depending on who you have your customs bond with will typically determine if liquidation reporting is available to you. If you're a current customs bond client, TRG offers liquidation reported for free via our Eagle Eye system. If you're curious about our Eagle Eye reporting system, we have a previous webinar demonstrating its capabilities, or you can contact me directly via my contact info at the end of the webinar. Otherwise, it might be possible that your customs broker offers some form of liquidation reporting, which they be able to provide to you directly. In the event liquidation reporting isn't available to you from your customs bond source, you can still utilize liquidation reporting via Customs Automated Commercial Environment, also known as ACE. You can sign up for ACE for free directly at Customs website. There are many advantages to keeping track of your liquidated entries through a liquidation report, but one of the most valuable is staying up to date on the most accurate information concerning your entries. Knowing which entries have liquidated and which remain unliquidated can help you assess how much open liability your company currently has in regards to importing. You can also make more informed decisions concerning your importing practices in order to stay compliant with customs. And that's it. Today we covered customs entry process and the requirements of importing to the United States. We broke down the liquidation process and what it actually means to have your entries liquidate. And finally, we covered how to protect your business with liquidation reporting. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I wanted to take a minute to go over what Trade Risk Guaranty is. We're an international trade insurance agency. We work directly with importers and exporters, and we've been doing this for 25 years. We've got over 13,000 clients that we work with every day, specifically discussing their complex topics and helping them navigate through this world of customs. We're an additional resource for them with their customs broker and freight forwarder. So our model does help save time and money, and our multi-year billing cycles are significantly less, usually on the customs bond, than what the average would be. Typically, people are paying somewhere between $475 and $525 for their customs bond, and we are down to $225 a year with our multi-year pricing on that $50,000 bond. You continue to work with any broker or forwarder of your choice, and then our in-house claims assistants from licensed customs broker are going to help you navigate any issues that come along the way. Thank you for attending our webinar. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly by my email, nick.esposito@traderiskguaranty.com, or via our Facebook group, International Trade Professionals-TRG. The added advantage of reaching out to the Facebook group is you'll access not only our experts on staff, but also experts in the international trade community. Additionally, check out our blog, traderiskguaranty.com/TRGpeak. It's got a treasure trove of excellent articles and information. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Again, thanks for attending the webinar, and don't forget to check your inboxes for an invitation to part 2.